Good evening, colleagues. Please be seated. Thank you. Right, shall we start? Agenda item number 1, apologies.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've had apologies from councillors Allen, Chisholm, Copley, Donaldson, Fairley, Lowson, Mafemba, McCarthy, Morrissey, Patterson, Habib Rahman, Hazel Stevenson, Webster and Gallagher.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, minutes of previous meeting. Does Council agree the minutes of the meeting held on the...
I'm down as being both present and having apologies, and I can confirm I was there last time.
Noted, thank you. Apart from that, does Council agree the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of September? Agenda item number 3, official announcements. On the 8th of September 2022, the nation received the news of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the UK's longest-serving monarch, at the age of 96, and after reigning for 70 years. Council is now asked to stand for a minute's silence in memory of the Queen, the late Queen. Thank you. Please be seated. I have received a request from the Labour Group for an emergency motion on the government's mini-budget and subsequent events. The grounds for the urgency relate to changes in the government policy and the limited ability to try to influence muted cuts to public spending before they are announced. I have agreed to that request, and the notice of motion is included in the items circulated tonight. An amendment to this has also been received and published. I have also received a request from the Liberal Democrats to ask an urgent question about the measures taken to ensure the installation of the Clean Air Zone signage, and whether this caused any distress and concern for residents. I have considered that request in accordance with the standing orders and decided that it should receive a written response from the Cabinet member, which will be circulated to all members. Could members also note that we are testing a countdown clock for speeches tonight? There will be, shown on the screen, we'll have the green, yellow, green, amber, red warning sign. So it is in a test, so if we can just bear that in mind, but you can. Thank you. Agenda item number 4, correspondence. We have no correspondence this month. Agenda item number 5, petitions. No petitions have been received this month. Agenda item number 6, public question time. No requests to address Council tonight have been received. Agenda item number 7, members' questions. 2 questions marked for written reply have been circulated. The responses were included in the supplemental agenda and published on the website. Agenda item number 8. Yep.
Thank you. Lord Mayor, yes, I did submit an oral question which was not accepted, and I was told that I would get an officer response, and I note that has not been made available yet. I would hope that I will hear from the officers in some point in the future, but it would be nice if a question to Council was answered at Council.
Was that from last month, from this month? Okay, thank you. That's noted. Agenda item number 8. Cabinet Member Reports. I now call upon Councillor Ali, Cabinet Member for Dynamic City, to present her portfolio report.
Good evening, Lord Mayor. Thank you. Actually, I'm just going to get my water. I hope the timer's reset. Good evening, Lord Mayor, comrades. May I start by offering my condolences to the residents of Newcastle for the demise of Queen Elizabeth II. I had the pleasure of meeting her at the opening of our refurbished City Library a few years ago and hope to meet her successor in the future too. I'm pleased to introduce a report for the Dynamic City portfolio this evening. This new portfolio brings together leadership for housing and planning strategies, ensuring the city prospers through innovative physical and economic regeneration. It will tackle and oversee advice and support for people facing homelessness and rough sleeping. It is responsible for licensing and regulatory issues, including HMOs, selective licensing, trading standards, resilience planning, environmental protection, and enforcement. Our priority outcome is to provide good quality housing in safe environments and to ensure we encourage development for the benefit of our people. In addition, bringing about decent neighbourhoods that provide a sense of community, putting residents at its heart and making Newcastle a great place to live. Our council priorities of tackling poverty, the cost of living crisis and net zero are reflected throughout the report. My thanks to council staff who support me in my role, working hard to make sure we deliver our services to a high standard. From the report, I want to highlight some key achievements in housing. 169 new affordable homes were built on council-owned land with a capital programme to support its delivery. Almost £5.5 million was awarded from the Brownfield Land Fund to develop 243 new homes in Phase 2 of the Scotswood development and a further 43 units in New Biggin Hall. 246 empty private sector homes were brought back into use using grants totalling to £183,000 and levering in £3.2 million of private sector investment. Almost £25 million was invested in home improvements to council housing, including heating systems, windows, bathrooms and kitchens. £10 million of external funding was secured in the last 2 years and has delivered insulation, low carbon heating and power to homes across the city, helping almost 2,100 homes to reduce energy bills and carbon emissions. A further £7.3 million has been secured to continue to deliver this programme, with plans to bid for further funding. Lastly, over 3,500 adaptations were carried out, ranging from level access showers to grab rails, especially helping older people and those with disabilities live independently for longer. So as you've heard, Lord Mayor, a lot of work has been done already regarding housing, home improvements and energy efficiency. However, there is still a lot more to do to bring social housing to a modern, energy-efficient standards. Within the next 12 months, I have identified the following 3 priorities. Firstly, £42 million is being invested to improve council-owned housing via YHN. This will include 1,776 new fire doors, 150 new boilers, 400 replacement kitchens, and 335 new windows and doors. Secondly, up to 320 households will be adapted for people that experience a disability or have specific mobility needs. And thirdly, 30 new homes and 7 retail units will be built and let. In addition, Lord Mayor, I seek to crack down on commercial trade waste across the city, starting with the most deprived wards and working our way into the city centre. I also want to create healthy eating environments across the city, tackling fast food establishments, and have a deep dive session booked later this month with officers to work on a strategy. And on that note, Lord Mayor, I invite questions from the floor. I will do my best to answer them tonight, but if I can't, I will make sure they are answered in due course. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ali. We have 9 members wishing to speak. We have 25 minutes for this item in total. So could I ask members to ask questions rather than make speeches? Thank you very much. I will call upon Councillors Sathian, Stone, Shatwell, then Avey. Councillor Sathian.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Ali for this very thorough and informative report, and can I thank her for all her excellent work on the front bench during a tough years. Coming to the question, Lord Mayor, energy efficiency is linked to the cost of living. Can Councillor Ali tell us what steps are we taking to make our stock more energy efficient? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. This was Councillor Sathian's maiden speech. Could we give her a round of applause, please? Councillor Stone.
Lord Mayor, can I answer one by one?
No? If you can, if you...
It's all right. It's okay.
Want to take them one by one?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can, if that's easier for
It'll be
you.
easier for me. Thank you,
yes,
Lord Mayor.
okay.
Thank you. Councillor Sathian, thank you and congratulations on your maiden speech. So you've asked about what steps were taken to make our council housing more energy efficient. So it is estimated that 16.8% of Newcastle homes are in fuel poverty. The whole of England is estimated at 13.2%, so we are higher than the national average. We have good housing stock information with a database providing energy performance data for all of the properties across the city. Primary intervention to support fuel poverty homes is to reduce energy demand through a fabric-first approach. Insulation measures with low carbon heating only installed following fabric improvements and assessment of new heating systems on fuel costs. We have secured government grants to deliver energy efficiency and climate change works, which includes the Sustainable Warmth Programme of £3.6 million. This will provide free measures to owner-occupied and private rented homes where the household is on low income and the property has a poor energy efficiency rating. 204 homes have already been improved so far, and funding for a further 120 homes is to be delivered up to March next year. The Social Housing Decarbonation Fund of £3.1 million. This is a combination of external wall insulation, loft insulation, windows and doors, and solar PV to 277 HRA properties. The Energy Company obligation of £1.73 million. This is cavity wall insulation installed in 1,465 HRA high-rise flats and low-rise properties. And to add, work is underway to develop a business case for setting up a North of Tyne Energy Advice Support Service. This will offer residents independent advice on help and services available and to improve take-up of existing grant schemes. I hope that answers your question. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Shatwell, can I ask you to make your way to the mic and speak after Councillor Stone? Councillor Stone?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm aware that Councillor Ali has, in accordance with the declarations of interest, advised Scrutiny Committee that she has had relevant interests and therefore could not answer questions at committee about HMO licensing policy. I have no criticism of Councillor Ali for doing so, but could I ask her to indicate what arrangements are in place to allow members of council to ask questions about this aspect of her portfolio responsibilities, and how she intends to ensure that arrangements are in place to to prevent any conflict of interest in this area. In short, Lord Mayor, could I ask who we should ask questions on this issue to, and will she identify a substitute who could answer in her place? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So the usual protocol is to make declarations using the declarations of interest system on the council, which is done on an annual basis, and all of my declarations are up to date. Any questions regarding my portfolio, and if I'm not able to answer because of those declarations, will go to another cabinet member or directly to the officers, and a response is provided directly from them to the person asking the question. I understand that is the usual way that we operate here.
Thank you. Councillor Ave, could you make your way to the mic to follow Councillor Shatwell?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Thanks for your report, Councillor Ali. I had two questions, but I'll just ask one given the amount of speakers. We recently launched a consultation on the allocation and letting of our council housing, which closes early next month. It'd be great to hear a bit more about this consultation, and especially how widely it's been publicised and promoted to residents, communities and stakeholders to ensure maximum engagement, given how important the future of council and social housing is for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Shatwell. The statutory consultation began on the 20th of September and will end on the 6th of November. It's being promoted through our usual channels, which will be facilitated by Newcastle City Council and YHN's Communications and Engagement Team, Newcastle Independent Tenant Voice and Let's Talk. It's being publicised to tenants in YHN's Homes and People's newsletter, via email, and all current housing applicants have been contacted directly. It's going out to the third sector via NITV. Four public consultation events are being held around the city. All housing stakeholders, including advice agencies, housing providers in the city and other neighbouring authorities, have also been contacted directly. If you have any suggestions to make, Councillor Shatwell, I'd be very happy to learn what those are and to implement them. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Rahman to make his way to the mic? And Councillor Avai will speak now.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Ali, for the report. Will you be able to inform us what work you've done with the Newcastle Great Park Consortium to finally get our estate adopted? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ave, for your question. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately, this evening. So what I will do is ask that question from our officers, get a detailed response to you by email. I hope that's sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Kane to make your way to the mic, please? You will follow Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. With the cost of living crisis worsening and having a devastating effect on households, coupled with the awful mini budget, and there's a destructive effect on the pound and mortgages from an unapologetic and heartless Liz Truss and Conservative government. People's households and home situations are becoming unstable. Homeless prevention is a priority for this council. I understand that we're moving from a hostel to a housing model. How is that developing, and where are we at with that?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Rahman. So, over the next year, the Council will be consulting with providers in regard to the recommissioning of our homelessness prevention services. Our ongoing engagement with residents, providers and the third sector has provided insight into residents' experiences and needs. Our long-term plan is to build on our move away from large-scale hostels to smaller units, combined with specialist outreach support. This approach has worked well and enabled us to repurpose our largest hostels and replace them with purpose-built accommodation, providing self-contained flats with staff on site. We have also won government funding to bring back into use 50 YHN long-term voids as an alternative to hostels and with higher levels of support. This has a 90% success rate and will attract over £200,000 in additional rent. We've also supported successful bids to government from commissioned housing providers to enhance their offer of dispersed accommodation. This will enable people to move on quickly from hostels to greater independence. Our primary aim is to work to protect residents from the impact of poverty and the government's austerity and welfare reform cuts by preventing homelessness at the earliest opportunity. Our work with YHN and Home Group to have no evictions into homelessness is a positive example. Housing providers also recognise the need to move to a more diverse model that can provide greater levels of support for those who experience poor mental health and have multiple needs. Our plan for implementation will be set out in later reports to Cabinet following further engagement with providers and residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Samad, can I ask you to make your way to the mic, please? Councillor Kane.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Ali, for the report. We're still getting used to the new portfolios, and I'm pleased to see that waste regulation and HMO licensing is covered by this report, because my question, I think, stands between the two stools. Every summer in Ousbourne Ward and South and North Jesmond, landlords of HMOs or their agents simply turf, or a significant number of them, I should say, turf rubbish, unwanted furniture, stuff left behind by departing tenants into the back lanes. This not only causes a terrible mess and makes it very unpleasant to live, but also the costs then go onto the council and thus the taxpayer. I was just wondering if there's more that could be done to tighten up regulations to punish those miscreants and encourage them to act in a more sensible and acceptable way. And I've also got a second question, if I may, which is we have a number of fire safety problems in relatively new built buildings, much reported in the press, whether that's to do with the illegal cladding being used, or in one case the fire brigade not being informed that a building was finished and the leaseholders having to pay for all the fire doors to be replaced. Is there anything we can do as a council to help fix this? Because it just seems incredible that somebody can move into a new build flat which is not only not safe, but they can't actually sell it on. They're stuck there with it. I just think that in this day and age, somebody must be able to do something more. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So first of all, thank you for your questions, Councillor Kane. So litter, other than what we're doing already, so making sure that any reporting is responded to in a timely manner with limited resources, we have 6 enforcement officers across the city. So with all of that, we need to continue to make sure that any reports that come in, we respond to those. I haven't had an opportunity yet to do a deep dive into issues regarding HMOs, so that's certainly something that's on my agenda, but I do need a little bit more time to fully understand my portfolio. Hopefully I can get a response to you from officers though. In terms of regulations with regarding to safety, again, I would need to find out what measures we have in place already and what we can do to tighten up those measures even further. With regards to waste crime, despite fewer cases reaching court, the courts having a backlog of cases due to COVID, we've still conducted a 4.3% of waste crime prosecutions nationally and 78% of all prosecutions in the region. So I think that the courts are more on board now with us, and we're seeing more prosecutions, but I absolutely accept that there is more to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors Hall and Ashby, could you make your way to the mics? You will follow Councillor Samad.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and can I thank Councillor Ali for the very comprehensive report, and can I thank her for her sterling work within her portfolio areas. Lord Mayor, isn't it very refreshing and indeed very reassuring that it is a hijab-wearing Muslim woman who is leading a portfolio striving to bring a decent neighbourhoods that provide a sense of community, putting residents at the heart and making it a great place for Newcastle. My question is on private properties, and more specifically about private landlords, as it is something that's very prominent in my area, in my ward. Could the Cabinet member tell us what the council is doing to ensure private landlords are making their properties energy efficient? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for your question and kind remarks there, Councillor. Properties in the private sector must have an EPC certificate with a minimum E rating for energy efficiency. We recently ran a comprehensive communications campaign to educate private landlords and managing agents on these requirements. Using government funding, we offered free EPC rating checks. We were an early adopter of the energy efficiency legislation. Checking EPCs and private rented property is part of our normal work in checking compliance. Through the selective licensing scheme, for example, we encourage landlords to install energy efficient boilers. We recently received a grant of £99,000 to work with private landlords to ensure they were made aware and understand the minimum energy efficiency standard. The project took a twofold approach. One stream involved identifying non-compliant properties in the sector, and the other focused on an information and education campaign for landlords. Over 700 properties were identified that did not have an EPC or have a failing rating. Over 200 landlords went on to become compliant once they understood the regulations. 123 were referred to enforcement for failing to comply after 2 warnings and notices were served. In addition, 95 were given financial assistance to complete an EPC. We also provided grants to landlords offering accommodation to vulnerable tenants. Grants of up to £250 per property can be used to finance any defects that means a property does not meet accreditation standards. This can include getting an EPC or other property improvements. Finally, we are continuing to raise awareness of the standards to landlords and tenants, which includes a citywide campaign. In addition, education materials have been produced, including an online toolkit, a monthly an e-bulletin and an online video. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. That was your maiden speech, Councillor Samad. A round of applause for Councillor Samad. Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The report notes some progress on brownfield land development, but significant land still remains undeveloped, particularly large swathes all along the riverside that are approved for about 3,000 or more new homes. My question is, what is the Council doing to bring forward these developments, either directly, such as using the grants that have been mentioned in the report, or to actively support developers to bring these forward?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So there's a number of ways that we're doing that. As part of the Council's asset plan, we are reviewing ownership of small areas of land in the city that are currently not owned by the Council and that could be suitable for housing. This significant exercise is an important part of our understanding of the city's assets in relation to inclusive economic development and supports many other council services that deal with complaints and issues relating to littering, fencing and tree maintenance, so land that is not being used to its full potential. Through the planning process and through identifying sites, and I can't remember the terminology used to identify sites, but I think it's a call for sites when we are looking for sites and asking people to put forward their sites and then referring that to investors to see what interest there is in their take-up. But I can get a fuller answer for you and get that communicated to you from officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The devil is often in the detail, so I refer the Cabinet Minister to the figures in the appendices of her report, and I want to know not just what has been done, but what remains to be done. Grants to bring private houses back into use are very welcome, but as I recall it, 246 houses last year, the Councillor Ali mentioned, is similar to previous years. What's the total number of the housing stock which requires refurbishment to 21st century standards? How many YHM properties have less roof insulation than the 27 centimetres recommended by the Energy Saving Trust? How many still need cavity wall insulation? These are the cheapest measures available to save tenants money on their soaring heating bills. The Council helped 70 families access food banks in the last year, but the West End Food Bank has already experienced a 1/3 increase in demand this year. Does the Council have any systems in place to ensure that those in hardship are identified and encouraged and routes to help them are communicated to them?
Thank you, Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your question. I'll have to check the figures. Those are the figures that are that I've put into my report and are accurate at the time of printing. So over 2021-22, there were a total of 246 empty private sector homes that were brought back into use. And the grant totalling was £183,000, and it did lever in £3.2 million. With regards to how many, I will have to check and come back to you. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the last part of your question. Access to, yes, I mean, you know, we've made that a priority in our council, tackling poverty, looking at the cost of inflation, the crisis that we find ourselves in. YHN are also doing a great deal of work to make sure that any tenant who is suffering, who is finding it difficult, who is experiencing a crisis, can simply reach out and use the many services that YHN offer. And I understand that part of that offer is some welfare advice. We obviously fund welfare advice and the CAB is part of a council service, but I know the YHN are doing a great deal for their own tenants using their in-house welfare advice advisors. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. We have one final question from Councillor Huddard.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Apologies for my voice. I wonder if Councillor Ali can give us a bit of an update about the current backlog of repairs and maintenance that we've experienced for the past couple of years following the pandemic and the recent gales, and how long do you think it's going to take to fix this, especially the ongoing problem about lifts? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Hoddard. As you know, you and I both share a place on the YHN board, and at the recent board meeting, stats were given. I can't remember them off the top of my head, so I would have to go back and check, but I do understand you also have that information. With regards to lifts, again, that is currently with procurement and legal. A response has been provided to YHN since that board meeting, and I too am waiting for further advice from both those teams. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Does Council agree to receive the report? Thank you. Agenda item number 9 is appointments. Are the appointments agreed? Yeah, Councillor Woodard, can you either use the mic or speak up?
Hello, Mayor. I think there's one or two slight technical amendments that came in after what's been circulated to the meeting, that's all. Like other people, I can't remember what they were.
If we don't know what they are, we can't agree them. I don't have a crystal ball.
If I recall correctly, that although we have got Councillor Huddart coming off over scrutiny to go to the Economy Committee, I seem to recall that's not quite as it is in the what was circulated beforehand. That's my understanding of it.
I still don't know what we're agreeing.
What was it about?
We'll sort it out next meeting. Thank you.
We agree the appointment.
So therefore, can we agree the appointment? As mentioned earlier in the meeting, we are now going to discuss the emergency notice of motion. And I ask Councillor Kemp to move, Councillor Kilgour to second.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Newcastle needed a budget that provided immediate and long-term help for those struggling with the cost of living crisis. It needed a budget that invested in public services and helped build back our communities after the devastation of COVID. It needed an economic plan to invest in innovation and sustainable growth and to get us to net zero. An announcement from the government that did nothing for Newcastle would have been bad enough,
But what the government unveiled actively makes things even worse. In the aftermath of the Chancellor's statement, the markets tumbled and the pound crashed. Instead of a sound economic plan, we have a rehash of trickle-down economics, the failed Thatcher-out theory that throwing money at the rich mysteriously benefits everyone else. It didn't in the 1980s, and it won't now. Our communities struggling with a record demand for food banks desperately need help. There was no money for the poorest and most vulnerable. Our families are struggling to pay their rent or get on the housing ladder. There was no money to build more genuinely affordable homes. Our residents living in fuel poverty need support. There was no additional money for insulating and retrofitting homes. Our small businesses are struggling with high costs and supply chain disruption. There was little money to give small businesses help. Our schools need funding to help pupils affected by COVID to catch up. There was no money for schools. Our patients have long waits for A&E. There was no additional money for the NHS. Our low-paid workers, the backbone of this country, desperately in need of a pay rise to cope with the rampant inflation. There was no money for workers. Our transport system need investment to grow the network. There was no money to help. Our councils are struggling with increased demand for services. There was no certainty over council funding. At a time when the war in Ukraine has highlighted our worrying dependence on fossil fuels, the government wants to start fracking, an ecological disaster that most members of the government admit won't deal with the immediate crisis and isn't a viable solution. The energy companies will have their mega profits protected, paid for by the taxpayers for decades to come, putting Britain in even greater debt. And the super rich have got tax cuts and boosts to bankers' bonuses. It's an economic disaster in the making. And who will be paying for this? Not those who can afford it the most. It's middle and lower income families that must shoulder the burden, just as they have done under austerity. This government isn't trying to tackle inequality, make life fairer or protect the environment. They're actively doing the exact opposite. I'd like to pick up on the amendment that has come in, which I assume is probably going to be, we're told it is going to be friendly, pointless, I would suggest, in gesture politics. So I would just like to address a couple of points. The amendment removes two elements of the resolution, which was about our economic plan, which we launched the consultation a week ago. You're suggesting we refresh. Well, on the basis it's a week into the consultation, it seems a futile suggestion. We are engaging across all communities, with all anchor institutions, with all people with a vested interest in the growth and success and sustainability of this city. Obviously, at the heart of that is net zero, poverty and cost of living crisis, our three administration priorities. So I would dismiss that element, and a request that the Council accelerates its plan for actions on the cost of living crisis. Just to highlight, today, going live is a directory, a guide for the cost of living crisis, how we will help our residents. We're acting quickly. We are acting with a focus on our residents. Our cost of living landing page on our website has been developed at considerable pace by our officers and is prominently promoted. And we're already seeing hundreds of more residents accessing the hub each day as the crisis intensifies. We're launching a crisis support team this week. This week we will also standing up a dedicated telephone helpline for residents seeking advice and support that reflects the diversity of the city and the circumstances they find themselves in. We have launched today the starting directory for our winter wellbeing zones, and we are actively encouraging partners across the city to put forward their suggestions of where they would be liking to contribute. We have a whole host of activities which I won't run through now. It's all in the cost of living crisis brochure. This pamphlet will be available in libraries and community centres across the city, as well as being live online. It's obviously a live and organic document and will be grown and added to. I'm writing out to partners and anchor institutions across the city this week to engage with them on our approach about the cost of living crisis. This is an administration that listens to our residents and acts rather than talks and has committees. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kilgour, you're seconding. Would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As everyone in this chamber knows, the cost of living is rising at its fastest rate in nearly 40 years, driven by the rising cost of food and energy, with prices rising faster than wages. Indeed, 40% of universal credit claimants are in work, and our poorest households spend more of their total budget on food or gas and electricity, and are estimated to feel inflation in real terms at least 3 points higher than the richest households. And yet, in this time of need, when our economy is still recovering from the effects of Brexit and the COVID pandemic, our government, our Prime Minister, saw fit to announce £43 billion worth of tax cuts, including removing the cap on bankers' bonuses, resulting in financial turmoil. The Prime Minister has abandoned, for now, her unfunded tax cut for the richest 1%, but it comes too late for those families paying higher mortgages and higher prices for years to come. So we find ourselves in the appalling situation of tax cuts for the very wealthy, but benefits not even rising in line with inflation. Make no mistake, this is a Tory crisis made in Downing Street, but paid for by ordinary people. So that's £43 billion of unfunded tax cuts to be paid for with increased public borrowing, meaning working people will pay the cost of this government's financial recklessness for years to come. And the government have indicated that this increased borrowing, this crisis, will have to be paid for, at least in part, by cutting public spending, shrinking the public sector so many of us rely on, our NHS, vital council services including social care, the police, fire service, prison service, when it is needed more than ever by a growing population whose resilience hasn't yet recovered from the pandemic. We've had 12 years of Tory governments, 12 years of austerity, increasing inequalities, coupled with low growth and flat wages. It's time for change. We need a general election and we need Labour's Green Prosperity Plan. But until we get that change of government, Lord Mayor, local authorities and our partners will continue to pick up the pieces and support our residents and communities. In Newcastle, we'll provide help and support directly, and we'll signpost people to advice and support available from other sources. We will do this because it's the right thing to do in the middle of a cost of living crisis. But make no mistake, it is morally indefensible that in one of the richest nations in the world, we've normalised the existence and usage of food banks. And it should shame us all that at a time when the rich are getting richer, helped along by this government, we're now talking about warm spaces to prevent people dying from hypothermia this winter. We need an inclusive economic strategy, locally and nationally, where those people who work to help grow the economy also benefit from it. We need a thriving public sector able to support people when they need help the most. We need a Labour government. I second the motion, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. We have an amendment. Can I call upon Councillor Cott to move the amendment, please? And it will be seconded by Councillor Stone.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It is clear that we have a government that doesn't care about people and a Labour council that likes to play politics with poverty. Liberal Democrats in this city hold this government in total contempt for the manner in which last week, at one stroke, it put at risk the pensions of mortgages of our citizens due to its total disregard of the normal rules of economic and financial competence. We fail to understand how the government can believe that at this time of crisis that bankers' bonuses and reducing the tax burden for the wealthy could be a priority. We are very concerned about the rhetoric of the justification for cuts based on a misguided ideology about shrinking the state. Public services must remain at the heart of all our policy making and support to our residents. We must and will work together to ensure that all residents are supported and that their interests are fairly represented. Lord Mayor, we are in sympathy with the administration for all of these reasons, but we question the motivation of the timing of this motion. The work on two of the major recommendations is at best in development. A plan for the cost of living was only press released today. Very interesting timing. You have either cobbled together something today for the meeting or have been caught out, or perhaps both. And the economic strategy isn't in place. The Council's record on the cost of living crisis has been one of slowness in response to the problems. Partners, residents, and the opposition have all been very frustrated by this. Labour has run this city for over a decade. Labour, as well as the government, needs to show that it is up to the challenge. We need action, not just rhetoric, to tackle the inequalities. We don't need to just see this piece of paper with a list of bullet points. We want to see a proper action plan. We want to see action in this city to tackle poverty. And if you can't do it, the opposition can, and we will. We talk to all partners across the city, and they tell us that this council doesn't do enough, and they also condemn the government. I think it would have been nice if we could have worked together to produce something for this meeting. And I'm very suspicious of the timing of this particular motion. You should not play politics with poverty. You should work across the chamber to deliver what's best for residents in this city. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Stone, are you wishing to speak now?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm not going to get into on this occasion, the party political knockabout, but beyond the motion, beyond noting that there is much to regret in the government's mini-budget priorities and the massive damage it has caused to the interest rate, to the economy and interest rates, and hence to mortgage payers in this city. My reading of the motion is that it particularly seeks to recognise the need for fair funding in recognition of its frontline role in the current cost of living crisis, but I'm concerned that there seems to have been a recognition today in Local Government Chronicle has reported it, that Paul Scully, the local government minister, as a Conservative Party fringe event, I don't tend to follow these closely, but on this occasion it's relevant, that there will be no fair funding review in the current spending review period. Now, we've been waiting for one of these since Greg Clark promised one in 2016, and it may be for another Chancellor or maybe another government even to actually deliver on this. But there is a big challenge, therefore, in terms of the implications of this for this council and for other councils as well in terms of local government funding and the pressure on council budgets. And I think that knocks on more relevantly and more directly to people in this city. And I think the motion doesn't really acknowledge that, and I think the amendment does try to bring forward the need to be aware of this. There are some big challenges ahead for this council, not least in terms of what this administration will put forward as its approach to the pay round. And there's also very important implications in terms of the impact of the mini-budget's changes to the interest rates and what that means for people in the city who have mortgages or who aspire to have a mortgage. There will be some very worried people in this city concerned about the implications of this, that will have a big impact on household budgets at a time when they're already massively under pressure. And of course, any decisions this council takes come next March about its own council tax and its own budget will have an impact on them as well. I would have liked to have seen the motion talk about those issues. The amendment tries to do so, so I hope I will support the amendment instead. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. We have 4 members wishing to speak. Councillor Frew, followed by Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Frew.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Timer. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll start with addressing some of the things that Councillor Cott said. I didn't really want to have to. I thought we'd all be in agreement on the main points of this motion, but at the end of the day, Councillor Cott has chosen to write an amendment without actually checking the work that the administration is doing. If he's asking us to consult the entire city within the 3 months that we have been working since the AGM, that is very ambitious, and we are getting on with the work. I'll also say a note of caution about talking about pensions, because it is a specific set of pensions, and actually when this news broke, I was with Pensions Committee, hearing from the people who are responsible for the council's pensions, and the specific pensions that have been affected by this are private, pretty badly designed, and are not like ours at all. So on to what I actually want to talk about. I first got to vote in the 2010 election. I remember very clearly being told about how you can't grow by spending. Now, on the other side of the equation, there is tax cuts. And the same sort of logic is being applied by the government now, as we were told in 2010 should not be used by Labour at the time. And the more nuanced and more interesting question is about the types of spending, the types of cuts that you are making, and how those actually affect growth. What we have been given by the government is entirely self-defeating, is a giveaway, which, at its most mildest, goes to some people and generates inflation, increases the cost of housing, and we get back to square one of the Bank of England then has to respond, and the same problems which they have been trying to avert come back and bite us all. The crash of the pound itself is supposed to have increased the cost of living by 0.5% by itself because of the way that we import our goods. So at worst, what this is a giveaway to their mates and a giveaway to themselves. And at the end of the day, what we have seen from a current government is playing chicken with the Bank of England, is utterly reckless, utterly irresponsible. And who will carry the can at the end of the day? It's going to be local government. It's going to be local government, it's going to be schools, it's going to be public services. It will be our children. And yet we still have no detail on the funding, and that has been really critical, that the government has not set out how they're going to pay for this, and that has caused the financial turmoil. If you take the economics out of it, it is simply poor governance. What the government needs to do is fix real problems around productivity, about good quality jobs, around infrastructure. We don't need a reckless set of ideologues in government gambling with public money, and even worse, they're betting on 37 Black.
Councillor Frew. Oh, perfect timing. Councillor Ferguson.
Lord Mayor, thank you. I stand here this evening somewhat in despair as I watch what happens to the country that I was born in, the country that I love, the country that I hope that I can grow old in. I am watching it slowly slide into becoming a sandbox for think tanks, having a go at their little pet theories, trying to find out what they can get away with, what might work, what might not, with very little reference to the people of the country that will be affected. Just in the last week, I spent time speaking to residents across the city on the doorsteps, and I pick up a palpable sense of concern, not just for themselves, because often it's wrapped up in a sense of strength and solidarity. We'll be all right. It's their neighbours, their friends, their family that they fear for. We knew this was coming months ago, this cost of living crisis, and I can understand why the Tories might have dithered and delayed as they chose to gaze at their navels. I don't understand why we needed to open a consultation in this city only a week ago, only just before the energy price cap skyrocketed. The Labour Group makes much of the role of local government in changing people's lives, in improving what happens in this city. And I wholeheartedly agree. We all share a concern about the potential impact of this mini-budget and the implications of it on public services and on financial support for the most vulnerable. I'm sure we all sit here reflecting with concern on what might happen with next year's budget proposals. We do agree across this chamber on the substantive points, I believe that. But we also need local action now, not a pause for a Labour government later. We said this last month, we say it again now. This crisis is happening right now, right here, and we must address it right now, right here. So don't talk to us about talk. You say there will be action.
I hope we will have the opportunity to discuss progress at the next meeting, not the next consultation.
Councillor Ali, followed by Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm sorry this is going to sound like such a rant, but I just couldn't get to statistical information that was provided on the internet because it is just so damaging, so evil as my thoughts go, because of the influx of casework that we've had for a long time now, and residents telling us repeatedly how difficult it is for them just to get on and live an ordinary life, even with limited means. I thought we'd come to the end of a crisis, being COVID-19, and having managed the public health portfolio at the height of the crisis, I saw firsthand the experiences that people suffer due to a range of inequalities, specifically and especially with their household income. Many have still not recovered from that and have come so deep into poverty that they can't find a way out. And this government, Lord Mayor, whilst we were working hard to save lives, we're just so busy partying and having affairs and plucking figures out of thin air that make absolute no economical sense whatsoever. It's as if they have no concept of the realities in this country that people are facing. And although I was extremely happy to see Boris Johnson go, and I do need to be careful what I wish for going forward, the new leadership, Lord Mayor, is just beyond belief, completely incapable and utterly incompetent. The new Chancellor has been stated in saying that his budget, that's going to affect the whole country, was due to the formation of a new government and the death of Queen Elizabeth, saying it was high-speed, high-pressure environment, and we could, as David Cameron used to say, have prepared the pitch a bit better. It doesn't matter how you prepared the pitch. You still believed it made perfect sense to lift the cap on bankers' bonuses and a 45% income tax rate cut. Is this what we do when we are under pressure? I don't remember a public outcry from bankers unable to make ends meet and relying on food banks. It's obvious the Conservatives will look after the rich, not just in desperate times, but at all times. Yes, we're seeing a U-turn on some, and one of many over the years, but it's just not good enough, Lord Mayor. We need leadership in this country that will prioritise those in need every single time. And that leadership is definitely not going to come from the Conservatives. The Chancellor has been heard using the phrase compassionate conservatism, thinking it was a good phrase, and it's something that he always thinks about in terms of policy, adding that they have a duty to look after very vulnerable people in this country. Yes, Chancellor, you do. You all do. Your actions, however, have not matched your words. Look what we are doing here in Newcastle, Lord Mayor. With over a decade of cuts and continuous financial pressures, we still seek to support people in reaching their potential. We still want to support people in this crisis and are doing everything that we possibly can in making that happen. Despite huge changes and continuous pressures on resources, we have made poverty and cost of living crisis amongst our priorities. I want to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashby, followed by Councillor Hay.
Lord Mayor. The companies are out there making undeserved fortunes. Electricity suppliers, gas suppliers, solid fuel suppliers, even those who are supplying logs cut from our forests where prices have gone up from £60 to £150 a bag. Those selling petrol on the forecourts. Where are their regulators? They are just being far too timid. The country needs them to be subject to a windfall tax now to help those who need it the most, to meet soaring energy and food costs. I believe the government should be raising the starting point at which basic rate tax is paid rather than cutting the basic rate. At least they've been shamed into dropping their tax cuts for the top 1% wealthiest earners. My son is amongst them, and he has been frequently sending me messages to say how uncomfortable he felt that he was being included in all these grasping folks who are getting undeserved tax cuts. It shouldn't be happening, at least it isn't happening now, and I hope that they can it for the foreseeable future. I support the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Hay will be followed by Councillor Donnelly.
Thank
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to speak in support of the emergency motion brought forward by the Leader and Deputy Leader of Council. Lord Mayor, whilst I agree with the motion in its entirety, I will focus my remarks on the need to increase state benefits in line with inflation. Colleagues, as the government implodes around itself, residents across Newcastle continue to struggle. Until recently, for my sins, I worked at the Pension Service, part of the Department for Work and Pensions. Every day, whilst there, I heard from older residents forced to make heartbreaking decisions just to survive. These aren't conversations unique to the Pension Service or limited to one section of society. Staff across the Department for Work and Pensions will be having the same conversation over and over every single day. Staff in job centres will be speaking with those facing in-work poverty or struggling to find employment. Staff working for the Disability Living Allowance team will be hearing from those with serious illness or a disability. Staff working as part of the Carers Allowance team will be hearing from those working tirelessly to care for a friend or a member of their family. It's a line we've all heard, but believe me, people are having to choose between heating and eating. Just let that sink in for a moment. In Britain, in 2022, people are having to choose between staying warm and being able to eat. It is shameful. Something needs to be done. The government needs to step in and ensure people have money in their pockets to not only to survive, but to thrive. I support the emergency motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hay. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In less than 2 weeks, she has crashed the economy. She said the economy was flatlining. She created an economic crisis, and the only rise has been in the Labour Party's poll ratings. Elected by so few to govern so many, with no mandate by the people. There needs to be a general election, Lord Mayor. Let the people decide. I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Kemp, I call upon you to reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, colleagues across the chamber, for your contributions. I'll start, however, by pointing out, Councillor Cott, that frankly your words are offensive. It is a disgrace to make the accusation you do, and I will outline shortly exactly why your facile and insulting comments are such. You talk about your cynicism of the timing. Unfortunately, I'm neither in charge of the timing of a mini-budget nor of the council meetings, so an emergency motion comes to this meeting because that's the scheduled date. I'm going to now also refer to the fact that the huge amount of work that the council officers have been engaged in over a number of weeks in pulling together a very comprehensive directory and guide around the support that's available to all our residents. And I think your dismissive response is actually quite dismissive of the staff of the council. So, you want action, so we shall have action. So this week I'm writing to partners in order to stand up to the Cost of Living Coordination Group, modelled on our COVID control group, bringing together partners and stakeholders from across the city, overseeing our collective efforts, tracking impacts of the crisis and ensuring the city works together to focus support on those in greatest need. That group will report to a Cabinet working group, which I will chair, enabling this council to lead the city's response as well as make our case to government that there is much, much more that they can do and must do to support us. I reference our dedicated phone line, our winter wellbeing zones and our dedicated outreach teams already in place. That, Lord Mayor, is what we are already doing to help our residents, over and above the significant support we already provide through the likes of our welfare rights services, our homelessness prevention team, our safeguarding teams and many more services which this week the Minister for Local Government suggested were fat that could be trimmed from local authorities. That, though, is only the start. The cost of living crisis is one of this administration's priorities, and to support our residents and our partners in this city working to support them, we will, over the next 2 months, provide support of over £1 million to nearly 17,000 children in the city through the award of free school meal vouchers for school holiday periods at October half-term and then at Christmas and February half-term next year. We'll extend the provision of activities for children over October half-term and at Christmas, where they can also access warm and nutritious meals. We'll start providing £1.3 million of support to families with their energy costs, with those who receive housing benefit but will not receive the full government cost of living payment, or who are not eligible, getting a top-up to equal the total cost of living payment of £650. Our food support will be enhanced through the Granger Market Delivery Scheme and food pantries working closely with our established Food Newcastle network to give people the right level of support with dignity and practical advice. We'll increase access to Meals on Wheels to people in higher need. We'll quickly distribute financial help such as the Warm Homes discount, energy grants, council tax rebates and crisis support. We'll create a grant scheme to support new fund to support organisations to deliver food parcels. In the interest, is it with the rest of the action, since we're criticised of no action? It's entirely up to the council. Okay, Lord Mayor, this is the work of an administration that listens to our communities, that understands our residents' needs and acts boldly and quickly.
Thank you.
Action.
Thank you. Thank you. We will now vote on the amendment. Is everybody's working? No? If you raise your hands, if it's not working, then we'll take it. Okay, right. Councillor Hindmarsh, would you like to vote? No, but which way are you voting? Which way are you voting? Right, we've got that. Next one, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Keating. Councillor Taylor. Are you managed? Councillor Huddard. Yes. Councillor Ali. Is that everybody? Oh, Councillor Dunn. Yeah, we've got that. Okay. So the amendment is not accepted. Can we now vote on the original motion?
Is it agreed?
Is it agreed? Agreed. Thank you.
It seems, Lord Mayor, that despite my previous complaints in this chamber, the leader has not learnt the distinction between personal insults and heated political debate. I hope he will do so before the end of his leadership, or that he is sanctioned as according to the Newcastle Charter. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
That's noted. Thank you. Agenda item number 10. The next motion is on electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This is to be moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Campion. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. For some time now, concerns have been expressed by electric vehicle users across Newcastle and Gateshead that on-street public charging points are often out of action. Many of these have ongoing technical problems and have been out of service for long periods, or currently have reported problems. The situation can be viewed at the ZapMap website. Lib Dem councillors are receiving complaints from residents and businesses about the small number of available working charging points. They say it's not easy to charge their vehicles away from home or business premises. There's often competition to access available commercially provided recharging points. When Lib Dem opposition councillors took this up last September, we were advised the current provision is dated, obsolete and unable to be maintained due to lack of spare parts and lack of an ongoing maintenance budget. Now, it's not clear to me why there is a lack of ongoing maintenance funding, given that the Council suggested that some of the income generated by the 2018 introduction of parking charges for EV parking bays would be used for this purpose, and at least £120,000 has been raised in that period since then. Nevertheless, officers advised us in September 2021 that this issue was intended to be addressed by a regional NEPO procurement exercise. A regional zero-emission vehicle policy was agreed by the Joint Transport Committee in March, and this identified a requirement for 28,000 public charging points in the region by 2035. Its forward by Chairman Councillor Martin Gannon states that investment in regional EV infrastructure is so high on the region's agenda, and the policy is another step towards the goal of a green, healthy, dynamic and thriving North East. It talks of a coordinated approach to the delivery of EV charging infrastructure. Through investing in infrastructure, we can deliver more zero-emission vehicles on our roads, tackle air pollution and create a better environment. That is the prize we strive to achieve for local people. Now, those are fine words that I'm sure we can all support, but what is the reality behind that rhetoric? The NEPO regional procurement exercise was advertised in February 2022. It sought to put in place a 15-year concession contract in order to enable long-term investment in regional EV charging infrastructure. And it notes that investment is needed to upgrade, operate and maintain the current network and resource its expansion in order to sustain a sustainable long-term future for it. Gateshead Lib Dem councillors were told by officers that there have been issues with the procurement carried out by NEPO, which they are working through. We understand the growing need for the infrastructure and will update members as soon as there is more information. Now, I assume that Newcastle officers and perhaps even Cabinet members too are also aware, but I'm unclear whether this has been made public at any time in any council reports. Now, after 2 years of trying, NEPO is not in a position to agree a contract for procurement of EV charging infrastructure across the region, and we are told by industry sources that the invitation to tender is so onerous and so poorly structured that not a single supplier considered it worthwhile to bid. Council suggests they are unable to replace the 250 legacy EV chargers, of which many are unserviceable, until the NEPO procurement proceeds. Yet elsewhere in the country, councils are adopting innovative solutions, including on-street charging points via lampposts. Now, given the importance of supporting the transition to ultra-low emission vehicles to meet 2030 net zero aspirations and increasing the supply of accessible public charging infrastructure, the Lib Dem opposition is concerned at the failure of the JTC, Transport North East and NEPO to identify a viable procurement solution. A lot of public money and time has been expended, but we seem to be no further forward. Months of problems are turning into years. The frustration of EV users at difficulties in finding a working public charging point is very clear to us. This has become a serious policy failure, which is a large obstacle to the region's transition to zero-emission vehicles, the achievement of the Council's net zero ambitions by 2030, and the imminent implementation of a clean air zone in Newcastle. On behalf of the Lib Dem opposition and on behalf of many residents, businesses and EV users in Newcastle who are affected by this unhappy situation, I call upon the Cabinet Member for a disconnected city, the Cabinet Member for an inefficient city and the Chair of the JTC, I realise is sadly not here with us tonight, to make urgent statements on what they plan to do to address this debacle. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Campion, are you wishing to speak now or do you reserve the right to speak? Okay, thank you. A very keen Councillor Frew.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So this is in regards to NEPO 232. The delays have been unfortunate. It's an extremely complicated, long-term investment that we are trying to get instituted, not just for Newcastle, but across 12 local authorities in the region over a 15 and now looking at longer concession contract. And so it gets very difficult and very technical at the point that the local authority is not putting any money into this. This is entirely about the private sector investing into infrastructure and then recouping their costs over a long period of time. It's very difficult, and I am not going to claim to be better than NEPO procurement officers at their jobs in creating this framework. I consider this motion not really a motion so much as a policy question. I'll give a policy question response, and my colleague, Councillor Byrne, will give a bit more of a strategic look at it about net zero. But I just want to be very clear that Councillor Stone is conflating slightly two different issues around EV charging. One is about the EV charging in the city centre and around employment areas and shopping versus at home, the street lights that he's talking about, something which the council has looked at, and it's very complicated, very difficult to do. We're trying. In terms of our engagement with NEPO on NEPO 232, I've engaged with the Chief Executive at NEPO. She has set out the problems to me. The tender went out earlier in this year. Problems were identified with the financial model. Since then, it has been withdrawn. NEPO have engaged with each tender individually, and they are restructuring the offer. They are due to re-tender quite soon. I can't go into any great depth about the changes that are being made because it's commercially sensitive. It is a procurement process that will, at the end of the day, be challengeable in court, and so there is simply a limit to what I am able to say. All I can say is that I've had reassurances from NEPO that they're addressing the issues. I am a member of the Collaborative Procurement Subcommittee, where I do see NEPO and other colleagues from across the region discussing the work of NEPO, and I'm happy to talk about the issue with them there directly. I've also had meetings with the private sector to discuss what they're able to provide to the city, and I'm quite hopeful that we will have progress on this issue soon.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I should note at the start that the electric vehicles are not necessarily the complete answer to removing our dependence on fossil fuels, as everybody knows. It's going to take a significant investment in multiple different technologies, including public transport, active transport, and hydrogen infrastructure. I must say it is a continuing disappointment that there is no hydrogen infrastructure north of Leeds. And I would urge the Council to look again at a solar or joint project to introduce some hydrogen infrastructure locally, particularly for heavy good vehicles where the technology would be best deployed. But that being said, electrification of private vehicles must be a critical element of decarbonising the economy. As colleagues will be aware, there are vast numbers of homes across the city that lack off-street parking, creating a significant block for many who would wish to go electric. We have to do more to try and support residents who want to go green. One suggestion I would urge the Council to investigate is lamppost charging points. These are not the expensive, high-tech fast chargers, but low-tech, low-cost upgrades compatible with the existing grid that enable residents to charge up overnight. These could represent significant value for money at the same time as having a significant impact on access for residents. There are companies that are already working with local councils on lamppost charging schemes across the country, and I would really urge the Council to investigate the significant potential that such a scheme could have for Newcastle. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Byrne, followed by Councillor Kane.
Yeah. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Like Councillor Frew, I don't support this motion because it's unnecessary. I'm more than happy to give a statement here and now. I do share the frustration with the delay to the NEPO procurement. We are keen to move forward with EV chargers, but at the same time we recognise that it's important to work with partners to resolve the issue because that we know that a regional solution is best. In the interim, we're working with the North East Combined Authority to install a range of rapid chargers in Gosforth and at the Helix site. EV chargers for taxis have also been brought forward in the city centre. I'll just pause at that point because I don't want to cause any confusion about the cars. The EV charging is not required for vehicles that will be able to move around under the cars, although obviously move to electric vehicles is something we look for in the longer term. And as Councillor Frew has already said, we are already looking at the opportunities for using lampposts for charging. I don't want to take up Council's time in what I consider an unnecessary motion, but I am going to take the opportunity to issue a plea to the opposition. The climate emergency is here and now. It is the challenge of our generation. We should be working together on this. I hope that in future, when you bring motions that are related to the climate emergency, You'll be bringing motions that suggest new ideas and that push us to keep our promise to go further faster. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kane, followed by Councillor Ashby.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Those of us of a certain vintage will remember that when the council was run by the Lib Dems, Forum for the Future designated Newcastle as the UK's most sustainable city, twice. And the EV charging network was one of a number of jewels in the crown that gave us that accolade. Newcastle at that time was so far ahead of the curve that it was installing chargers across the northeast, not just the city. But when Labour took over in 2011, they abandoned our commitment to sustainability, and nothing really happened until the Lib Dems climate emergency motion that was presented here in April 2019. To me, the decrepit state of the EV charging network is symptomatic of those 8 years of drift under Labour. So we have agreed on a climate emergency, but we are now a third of the way through that period between the motion and the net zero by 2030 target. And yet residents who have made the switch away from fossil fuels and towards electric vehicles struggle to get them charged. I would say it's about time the administration got their finger out. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Councillor Ashby.
Lord Mayor, already there are over 500,000 private electric cars on Britain's road. Are we at a tipping point? Perhaps, but hydrogen could also be the fuel of the future. But infrastructure and investment are essential if the momentum for change is to be sustained, whatever the motive power. Already, new build commercial premises like a drive-through in Parklands Ward are making private provision. But more can and must be done, led by the City Council. I draw attention to the many streets of London in residential areas where electric vehicles can already be plugged into lampposts. But there must also be a word of warning. Many people are uncomfortable about our dependence on Middle East oil and the dubious human rights and democratic credentials of some of the states they're in. Calls for boycotts are overwhelmed by the need to keep the wheels turning. The more dependent we become on electric vehicles, the more the balance of power will shift not just to US-led multinational manufacturers, but also to countries and their controllers who are the source of rare earth materials needed to make the batteries, like cobalt and lithium. The bulk of the cobalt supply comes from the politically unstable Democratic Republic of Congo, a byword in my youth for massacre. Cobalt is produced at nickel and copper mines, and they are therefore dependent on their economics. Environmental standards and the treatment of workers, including child labour, are already a cause of concern. The DRC supplies about 70% of the world's cobalt, but 80% of its major industrial cobalt mines are owned or financed by Chinese companies. The Communist Party there, identified by our government as a strategic competitor, have an important weapon in their hands. Tesla is trying to lock in supply agreements with non-China associated operations. Lithium is more widely available, even in mine water under County Durham. Investment could give us greater self-sufficiency, but strategic thinking to create conditions to encourage such investment beyond the next U-turn is currently in short supply from our current government. And of course, there could be a disposal problem for toxic materials in the future. Already, 1 million e-cigarettes go to landfill every day because recycling is difficult or expensive or not required. We must be aware there are no simple answers to mankind's problems and possible bad consequences, whatever is done. Nevertheless, I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Campion, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's clear that EV charging infrastructure is vital to our attempts to move towards carbon neutral. I firmly believe that we need to do more as a local authority, we need to do more as a region, and I welcome Councillor Byrne's comments that she will look forward to working with us across the chamber to ensure that we together can find solutions that will bring Newcastle into the future. But there is a pressing issue, and that is the lack of infrastructure. We can't wait. We can't keep waiting for infrastructure to appear at some point in the future. If we are to move towards net zero, if we are to move to a greener future, we need to ensure that the infrastructure is there. I look forward to seeing what the Cabinet member and her colleagues do to make sure that we get the infrastructure now, not in the future. I support the motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stone, would you like to reply?
Well, I haven't heard very much in the way of a meaningful response from the administration. Councillor Frew told us we are trying and couldn't come up with anything more than that in terms of any substance. They may be trying, but they're failing, frankly, on this one. I asked what they're doing to address the situation. It sounds to me like they've had a few meetings and scratched their heads a bit. That's the substance of what you've done. There's no actual timetable or actually clear strategy in terms of the way forward on this one, and it's not good enough. It really isn't good enough. There was nothing about where the revenue from electric vehicle parking in the city has gone to for the last 4 years. It's gone somewhere in the Civic Centre's coffers. We'd like to know perhaps why you didn't use it as was promised for maintaining the EV charging network. So this is a very underpowered and incoherent response. There was nothing in the response which suggested that there's any recognition that their current approach has been commercially absolutely unviable. There was a lot of hurt feelings that anyone should have the audacity to question or challenge their failure. And there was a complete lack of contrition or any recognition that their grand ambitions on net zero are nothing if they're not viable, if they're not putting in place the viable infrastructure to support a shift away from petrol and diesel, then we are doomed to failure. We are not going to achieve it by 2030. We're not going to have any EV chargers by 2030 at this rate. So I get that Councillor Frew may not think he can do better than the procurement officers. I probably acknowledge his point on that one, but ultimately it's he and his colleagues who are the ones who are politically accountable, and the opposition will continue to hold them to account on this. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Therefore, is the motion agreed? Are we going to a vote? Yes. Has everybody been able to vote? Yes, that's a good reason to. Right, Councillor Keating, are you voting for or against? Councillor Ashby? Councillor Cott? Councillor Ali? Is that everybody? That motion has been declined. Agenda item number 11, the next motion, tackling unsolved crimes. We have 2 amendments to this motion. I will call upon Councillor Ferguson to move the amendment. Oh. The motion. Sorry about that.
It's all right, Lord Mayor. I'm still happy with the motion that was originally written. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Everyone wants to be able to rest easy in their bed at night without fear of what's going on outside. When you're walking down the street, you want to be able to do so without fear. But whilst we all might want this, I think we all accept that some level of crime will inevitably happen, spurred by a range of factors, some of which are controllable, some of which are not. If we were able to achieve utopia, we might not need police. But sadly, we do. And whilst we might not prevent all crime from occurring, we should be able to solve as much of it as possible. This shouldn't be a controversial point. We might have debates and discussions about retributive versus rehabilitative justice, and I know my views on the matter, but you can't take forward meaningful justice without first identifying the perpetrators. As the text of the motion notes, over 48,000 cases in the year to March 2022 were closed with no suspect identified. Nationally, the categories of crimes with the highest rates unsolved are theft offences. The numbers are shocking. Burglary, 89% unsolved. Robbery, 90% unsolved. Bike thefts, 97% unsolved. And pickpocketing, 98% unsolved. We need a visible policing presence and a proactive approach to identifying perpetrators. We need officers on the ground who understand our communities and who can not only provide a regular, visible presence, but also understand where and why crime occurs. Our neighbourhood policing teams are rightly valued, but whether it's 600 or 6,000 officers, I believe many members of the public would agree that these new recruits should be placed in our communities, liaising with our neighbourhoods. And you will note that reference to 600 because I note that one of the amended motions revises the officer uplift numbers. I will preempt this particular argument from the group opposite by asking, why would ITV News have been briefed 1,200? That's where I got the number from. And just to acknowledge and refute another inevitable counter-argument, this motion is not going after our officers. We should be immensely proud of what our constables do day in, day out, often in extremely challenging circumstances. No, this is about political accountability. I didn't support the introduction of police and crime commissioners because I believe the justification for the role is flimsy at best. But if they are to do anything, they are there to provide political accountability to the public for the performance of their force. And so that is why this motion is for our Police and Crime Commissioner. We will find common ground across the chamber that the government must look at resourcing our police forces appropriately. I would prefer that the Home Secretary focuses her energy on that rather than getting horribly excited about deporting vulnerable people to Rwanda. We need proper resourcing, proper support, proper political focus on the issues that matter. But where there are local variations in performance, and we must accept that there are, then it simply isn't enough to point the finger at London, cover our eyes, and bung our ears. Our motion provides one suggestion about how to address these issues within current resource constraints. I call on the Council to back this motion, to seek answers and deliver the political accountability that members of the public should rightly expect on this vital matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak now or would you like to reserve? Reserve. Okay, thank you. The first amendment, could I ask Councillor Donnelly to move it, please? Just move the amendment, yeah? Please, yes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Safer Neighbourhoods and Action Problem Solving, SNAPS, meetings ceased to be held citywide as it was reduced in the 2016-17 budget. This was in light of the financial pressures, which I accept was limiting resources that the Council can provide. However, as a result, we have become very reactive, whereas before we were very proactive in trying to prevent an issue before it escalated. The amendment to the motion strives to seek that we work together to resolve these issues for residents across our city. The current model is sadly allowing a disjointed approach. An example would be street lighting. The City Council dimmed the street light across the city at the same time as the Police and Crime Commissioner was striving for more lighting and more CCTV. And as Councillor Smith would point out, there's a school route in Leamington Ward which is not even lit at all. As councillors, we sometimes receive information regarding regarding neighbouring wards and exclusion zones. Unfortunately, we know very little about this, why the exclusion's been put in place, the likely effects of the dispersal and displacement. Sorry, Lord Mayor, that was not my phone, I've got to add. That often leads to. The Council is committed to providing an additional 1.5 million. If this makes no sense, Lord Mayor, I cannot be accountable for the phone going off. The Council is committed to providing an additional 1.5 million. This is welcome investment. We need to make sure, however, that all councillors are signposted now to the services that exist, such as the street wardens. We currently have 6. There's currently a vacancy of 3, however, but we need to be signposted to what we currently have now. I hope that Councillor Ferguson will see this as a friendly amendment to work together to reintroduce snaps and hopefully greater communication. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, are you seconding this motion? This amendment? Would you like to speak now? Okay. The second amendment is to be moved by Councillor Story. Yeah, Councillor Story. Pay attention, Councillor Stone.
Lord Mayor, Council, I wish to speak for the amendment that I've put forward. And I would like to say, whilst I appreciate the thought and concern that Councillor Ferguson's put into the motion that he's put forward, and I really do appreciate that all councillors in the room really want to see that our communities get the policing that they deserve. I don't feel the motion does that or takes us to that. Firstly, the motion is built on data that is unfortunately inaccurate. I wish Northumbria Police were due to get the numbers of officers stated. However, that is not the case. I've conducted due diligence. I've fact-checked. The motion states that Northumbria Police will recruit 1,200 officers over the next 3 years. This isn't true. And sadly, Councillor Ferguson, not everything that you see on the telly is accurate. Since the government's enforced ideological cuts on policing began in 2010, Northumbria Police has lost 1,100 officers, a budget reduction of around 148 million. This, of course, means there's less police on the streets and there's less police detecting crimes. The Conservative government cuts have destroyed the very fabric of our criminal justice system. Our police service, the entry for justice for victims of all crimes, is cracking at the seams. Our police officers are under huge stress. Under the government's recruitment programme, Operation Uplift, yes, the Home Office will fund Northumbria Police to recruit 615 officers. The Commissioner, the Police and Crime Commissioner, is using the precept to recruit 60 more. That's 675 officers. Our police force is under huge pressure. They've been forced to pivot resources to mental health crisis, cybercrime, a surge in violence against women and girls, hate crime, and increases in violent crime both at a local and national level. Without the resources they need, and we are far short of even seeing a recognition by the government that more is needed. Indeed, the latest iteration of government has shown in the last week that all we can expect is further cuts across the public sector. In short, we're not going to see any more police on our streets anytime soon, and this motion certainly doesn't take us to that outcome. I would welcome every single councillor in this chamber tonight writing to our new Prime Minister, if she can be found, if she's still in post, setting out the issues that our communities face and demanding additional resources are given not only to our police force but also to local authorities. For health, to prevent suicide, mental health crises and poverty, that's what's going to free up police and resources to tackle crime, and that is how we will see an improvement in unsolved crime figures. I ask you to support my amendment, We need deep structural change in our criminal justice system, and this needs funding. We need to support our police force. We need to support our Police and Crime Commissioner. And we need to put our voices together in partnership to demand better for all of our communities. Councillor Donnelly, I would like to say to you, I absolutely agree with you about the value of SNAPs or problem-solving groups. And I'm absolutely proud to say that through the growth investment for antisocial behaviour, there will be an introduction of SNAPs or SAPs in areas where there currently isn't. And so I hope that means that you will support my amendment. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Story. Councillor Gray, would you like to speak now or reserve? Okay, thank you. We will go on to members. Councillor Penny Evans, would you like to speak now? Followed by Councillor Ave.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I should be supporting the amendment by Councillor Story and not the original motion, as I believe the motion is designed to mislead and deflect the blame away from this shambolic government who have underfunded our police force since 2010. As Councillor Story mentioned, Northumbria Police Force has had 148 million cut from its budget and a loss of 1,142 police officers and hundreds of other backroom staff, all of which impacts on what they can do. Funding to recruit new police officers is welcome. However, what I think the figures didn't take into consideration is that as we recruit new officers, we obviously are not replacing those who are retiring or leaving the force through other reasons. I support this motion. I support the amendment because this amendment calls on the government to tackle and to fund the police and to offer resources to our services. But just to pick up on a few points that Councillor Ferguson mentioned, I think when he talked about political focus, I'm really proud to have a Police and Crime Commissioner who puts poverty and tackling the causes of crime at the most heart of all the work that she does. The work in our communities, looking at youth services, looking at how we can fund different housing situations, how we can keep people out to criminality. That's how we can help also to reduce and prevent crime. And for me, that's one of the priorities that we need to be looking at, especially in terms of the cost of living crisis that comes, because we do know that as poverty rises, so does crime. So we need to be making sure that we're tackling the causes and the root aspects of what impacts on crime. I have to also say that Newcastle is a safe city. And, you know, I'm proud that we live in such a safe city, and Northumbria Police Force has one of the highest public confidences in the country, always gets incredibly good feedback from all the public on the work that they do. And I know that it was recently inspected and was voted good, a rating that's improved since 2019. So, Lord Mayor, I'm supporting the amendment because I think we should be calling on the government to fund our police force. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ave, followed by Councillor Pretzwell. Councillor Ave.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Crime is a public health issue. It shares common causes with ill health, particularly poverty, and fear of violent crime is itself a major cause of anxiety, as it has been suggested by many community health journals. Crime and criminal behaviour have direct and indirect victims. The impacts of serious crime are well known to all of us, but the consequences of less serious crimes are perhaps as clear and obvious. If we don't tackle crime in our city, then we can't achieve our other targets. The target to achieve clean air, and we won't be able to tackle health inequalities and the crisis in mental health, which has been made worse by the pandemic. For example, if the metro and public transport network are associated with antisocial behaviour, we will never get the high level of public transport usage that we see in many modern European cities. and then that would lead to not achieving our air quality targets, which will then lead into respiratory, cardiovascular disease and other illnesses. Again, if our parks and green spaces are targeted by vandals and illegal off-road bikes, the families won't use these facilities for exercise and activities that the children need for healthy development and adults need for their mental health and physical well-being. In my ward, we have some excellent parks and green spaces, such as Big Waters and Havana Nature Reserve, but frankly, many families are too afraid to go out and enjoy these spaces because of their association with crime and antisocial behaviour. I support the original motion, Lord Mayor, because I think a more visible policing presence in hotspot areas will have a significant impact on preventing crime and antisocial behaviour in Castle Ward and across Newcastle. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pretswell will be followed by Councillor Campion.
Lord Mayor, I'm surprised that Councillor Ferguson has been taken in by the Tory rhetoric that everyone but the Tories are responsible for the unsolved crime rates and seeking to hold our Police Crime Commissioner to account for this, for it's the Tories who cut police funding and the number of police officers on our streets. There has currently only been government funding for 615 replacement police officers, but this figure falls far short of the number of officers lost due to cuts. And remember that it takes 3 years to train each police officer, so this leaves a huge gap of experience in our force. I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Ferguson's statement that residents value a visible police presence, as I heard many examples of just this, along with expressions of appreciation directly from residents at a PCC and police talk at Jesmond Library this morning. However, let's be clear that residents also understand the impact of the Tory cuts and that these cuts inevitably mean that at times community policing teams will need to be used to support urgent issues elsewhere in our region. I support writing to the government on these issues, and as that is where responsibility firmly sits, and agree that instead of a glass a third empty approach, we take the glass 2/3 full approach and commend a police force that can achieve a 62% success rate in solving crime in an environment of cuts and ongoing police and support staff shortages, and that can move from a force requiring improvement in 2019, when our Police Crime Commissioner Kim McGuinness was first elected, to a force receiving a rating of good from a recent inspection. I'm supporting Councillor Story's amendment.
Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Gray now, please? Yes. Councillor Gray will be followed by Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Since austerity began in 2010, Northumbria Police has lost 1,100 officers and had a budget reduction of £148 million. These budget cuts were first introduced by the Lib Dem Tory coalition government. It's where the cuts started, and you can make all the sounds you want. That's where it started. That's where these problems have started, the coalition government.
Stick to the business, please.
The government was warned then that the public would feel the outcome of the impact of these cuts for years to come. But ministers did not listen, and the public have received no apology for these dangerous budget cuts. Under the government's police recruitment plan, known as Uplift, the Home Office will fund Northumbria Police to recruit 615 officers. So far, the force has hired 473 of these. The Police and Crime Commissioner is using the precept to add 60 more officers to this. There is no suggestion from government that the full 1,100 will be replaced. There may be additional recruitment to replace departing or retiring officers, but these will not increase the overall headcount. This will just be a backfill. The Police and Crime Commissioner sets the strategic priorities for Northumbria Police, but cannot direct where individual officers are deployed. This is an operational policing decision which must be taken rightly by the Chief Constable. The crime rise figures in the motion only show an increase if compared to crime rates recorded during lockdowns. Councillor Ferguson is either deliberately failing to mention this or he isn't very good with the data. The total recorded crime in Northumbria Police Force area is up 5% year on year, but when compared to the last year before COVID hit, 2019, total crime is actually down by 6%. In response to Councillor Donnelly's comments, members are already organising meetings with the police. Me and my ward colleagues do this on a regular basis to talk about specific issues, taking a proactive approach to ward and area-specific issues. And to Councillor Vai's comments, the PCC and transport operators are making huge efforts to make travel on buses and metros safe. A safer transport Northumbria app has been introduced by the PCC to enable safe and discreet reporting of such issues. Lord Mayor, we should back our Police and Crime Commissioner Kim McGuinness, the brilliant work that her office and all of Northumbria Police are doing, and back Kim's plan to fight crime and to prevent crime. We should be placing the blame on those in the Tory government that continue to starve our police, even with all the issues that members across this chamber have mentioned, and those new and changing issues that Councillor Story has mentioned. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Smith will be followed by Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Although I've seconded the First Amendment to this motion, I wasn't planning to speak until I saw the Labour amendment. The original motion was asking for the Council to ask the Police and Crime Commissioner to explain the reason for such a high number of unsolved crimes and about the plans to address this. If questions are not able to be asked by this Council about police performance, what is the point of the Police and Crime Commissioner? I believe that asking the Police and Crime Commissioner for an explanation of what is being done to tackle problems in our communities is a key part of the role. Let her tell us what the causes of the problem are. Lord Mayor, I welcome the reintroduction of SAPS meetings that Councillor Donnelly's motion calls for, or amendment calls for, because multi-agency working is definitely key to addressing many of the issues our communities face.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, you will now second the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The statistics that we are asking the Council to note are truly shocking. So I decided to look at Kim McGuinness's PCC webpage to see how this problem is being tackled. Firstly, I was disappointed to see that the latest statistics were from December 21. It tells me about the number of crimes in 2021. There was a large section highlighting the 21% decrease in antisocial behaviour, but nothing to emphasise the 23% increase in sexual offences. There's a lot about satisfaction rates, but nothing about the number of crimes solved. And when I looked at the most recent performance data, there was a lot about response times and looking after victims, which is of course important, but it was almost impossible to find any information about convictions, except occasional references to meeting a threshold. I thought I'd have a look at the PCC's 4-year plan for policing priorities. This might give me more information. Instead, I got a message that said, "Oh no, that page can't be found. Don't worry, nothing is broken. However, the page you are trying to reach is not available." Not very reassuring, is it? Lord Mayor, I still have a vivid memory of the first time my house was burgled. The shock of walking into the kitchen in the morning and seeing the microwave had gone, and then going into our living room to see the broken door into the garden and the devastation of our belongings. It wasn't so much the loss of property that was my concern, but the sense of violation of my home, of not feeling safe in my own house. Yes, I wanted the police to respond quickly and be sensitive in their inquiries, but much more importantly, I wanted the perpetrators caught and other people to be spared what I went through. So it's really disappointing to see the statistics about the number of cases closed with no suspect identified, and that 9 out of 10 thefts were unsolved in the year to April 22. I'd like to re-emphasise that this motion is not in any way a criticism of our hard-working police officers, who I know do their best to catch and convict criminals. But we do believe that a more visible police presence in hotspot areas would help, and that we need to see plans for how the new officers recruited can be deployed to improve these dismal statistics. The PCC needs to demonstrate what she is doing to make a difference to the lives of Newcastle residents affected by crime. We're very happy to accept Councillor Donnelly's amendment, as we fully recognise the benefit of SNAPS meetings. But we reject the complacent Labour amendment, which, as usual, puts all the blame on government and refuses to take any local accountability. Please support the original motion.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Ferguson, would you like to reply? Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. 4th of July 2022, ITV News. Applications for the final phase of a major recruitment drive by Northumbria Police are now open. The force is taking on 1,200 new recruits over 3 years as part of a national police uplift programme. Whether ITV News have been misled or they are part of the mainstream media fake news operation, I would be delighted to have clarified. I can only refer to numbers that I can find publicly. Lord Mayor, I thank colleagues for their contributions across this debate, but I'll confess in some cases I despair. Of course, the group opposite will want to portray this as a national issue, but there is no meaningful engagement in this debate on the local issues on which this motion is founded. The Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner was created to supposedly increase accountability. So why shouldn't we ask difficult questions about local outcomes? I can assure Councillor Pretzwell that I didn't come up the Tyne in a bubble, and I am not taken in by Tory rhetoric. I am asking here about the differential outcomes between other police forces in the country and the one that covers our area. Let's look at the numbers. Northumbria is the worst performing English force north of Leeds on the metrics referred to in the motion, despite having the 9th highest head count per 100,000 population in England. Now, of course, maybe I have the wrong end of the stick. Perhaps we can criticise outcomes when the Labour Party is leading the discussion and pinning it on the Tories. But when we look at differential outcomes locally where Labour is responsible, maybe that's just beyond the pale. Because the source of these numbers comes from Yvette Cooper in the process of challenging the Home Secretary on the 20th of June. And a few days earlier, on the 11th of June, she observed crime is up by 18% and prosecutions are down by 18%. I presume we are happy with her criticisms and her questions. What's different here, other than who's asking the question and what the question is being asked about? Perhaps the Police and Crime Commissioner does not see it as a strategic priority to tackle unsolved crimes. Where are the 675 officers that the amended motion refers to going? Where's the recognition of differential outcomes for our police force relative to others? There is none. I see Councillor Donnelly's motion as fundamentally friendly, and I agree that a collaborative approach to tackling crime is right and appropriate. On the other amended motion, Councillor Story says we won't see any new bobbies on the beat as a result of uplift. Well, residents will rightly ask what chance we have of seeing the statistics in the motion change for the better, and where on earth will those 675 officers go?
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Right, colleagues, is the first amendment agreed? The first amendment is Councillor Donnelly's, yes. No, so we're going to vote? Anyone unable to vote? The usual suspects. Councillor Ashby? Agree with the amendment? Yeah. Councillor Keating? Agree with the amendment? Councillor Ali? Against the amendment? Councillor Kemp? Against the amendment? Oh, it's gone. Oh, here we go. In that case, the amendment has been declined. We will now vote on the second amendment. Is the second amendment agreed? Is there another vote? Okay. Let's go to the vote. Has everybody had the chance to vote? Councillor Ashby? Councillor Keating? Oh, 4. Councillor Ali? 4. That's everybody. So that amendment is accepted. Is the motion agreed with the amendment? No? We need a vote again. Can we go to the vote? Has everybody had the chance to vote? Councillor Keating? Abstain. Councillor Ashby? Abstain. Councillor Ali? Is that everybody this time? Yeah? Right. So, the original motion with the amendment has been agreed. Thank you. Agenda item number 12, the next motion, is anti-racism. This is being moved by Councillor Ali and it will be seconded by Councillor Story.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. October marks Black History Month, and as this Council's newly appointed Equality Champion, I'm bringing this extremely important motion to Council this evening. The motion deals with discrimination, in particular racism and Islamophobia. I am full of emotion tonight, Lord Mayor, totally charged with anger, upset and frustration, having experienced so much racism and Islamophobia in my own life in recent years, but in particular this year. Last year at the AGM, I made a public promise to challenge racism in all its forms. I didn't realise at that time just how personal this will become for me and how difficult it will become to call it out. Black History Month has 3 particular aims and themes: to dig deep, look closer, and think bigger. And that's exactly what I've done in bringing this motion tonight. Firstly, I've dug very deep into my own role as an elected representative and what it means to me by being a woman of colour. To represent everyone in this city, regardless of the colour of their skin, their religious beliefs, or any other difference they may have, and to evidence this where possible. I will continue to use this platform to challenge racism and call it out, Lord Mayor, and use it to root out systemic racism that is often played out by the hands in which we give power, authority, and a level of control. I will work proactively in seeking to apply policy, not just simply adopting it. Secondly, I've looked very closely at people's behaviours, at policies and procedures, at rule books and reports, and conclude that there is an enormous challenge in hand to deal with. Structural and systemic racism is real, and it's in here, in this grand institution. And thirdly, I've thought big, very big, much bigger than lighting the Civic in pretty colours, bigger than giving out praise, bigger than making claims, And in this motion, thinking big, I bring to you and seek to do two things. Firstly, to pledge to make Newcastle an anti-racist city. What does this mean? This does not mean not racist. It is a process of actively identifying and opposing racism. The goal of anti-racism is to challenge racism and actively change the policies, behaviours and beliefs that perpetuate racist ideas and actions. Anti-racism is rooted in action. It is about taking steps to eliminate racism at the individual, institutional and structural levels. It is not a new concept, but the Black Lives Matter movement that we have committed to has helped increase the focus on the importance of anti-racism. The problem with systemic racism is that it is all around us. We are born into it. It is deeply embedded in our culture and our communities, including schools, the justice system, the government, and hospitals. It is so pervasive that people often don't even notice how policies, institutions, and systems disproportionately favour some while disadvantaging others. And we need to accept that in this chamber tonight, Lord Mayor, and have conversations that may feel awkward or difficult. Secondly, to listen and to work with people experiencing all forms of racism, and this includes Islamophobia. To develop a charter that reflects the lived experiences of our communities, one that clearly outlines actions that need to be taken to readdress power imbalances in our city. I ask that you agree this motion and commit in tackling racism in all its forms. Together, let's call out racism and make Newcastle the best city for everyone to live, work and study in. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Story. Councillor Story, you will now second the motion.
Lord Mayor, Council, very proud to second the motion. We live in a beautiful city, a warm and mostly welcoming city. However, I also know racism exists in our communities, in our institutions, and here in Council. I've witnessed this, I've experienced this, and it's crucial that we don't shy away from acknowledging this. Because if we deny racism exists, we deny the solutions to tackling racism, and we are guilty of both supporting racists and ensuring racism endures. Some people think that racism is visible and obvious and comes from individuals through physical and verbal abuse, and open contempt and hatred for those of us who are from a black or minoritized community. We would all, I am sure, speak out and condemn this type of racism. And while this is definitely a form of racism, other elements of racism are widespread but seemingly harder to identify. In the UK, there is clear evidence that all of our major institutions, our police forces, our schools, our universities, our health services, and our government operate in ways that discriminate against black and minoritized people, and that includes children. This systemic, structural and institutional racism is sadly endemic within our society. As a council, we need to acknowledge this, and we need to strive to be leaders showing the way in developing policies and services that challenge racism in all of its forms. The charter that we set out sets to do that, and it gives hope to children and young people and families in this city that we can change, we will change, and we will be better. Children and young people from black and minoritized communities need to have this reassurance and hope. Racism traumatises children. When it comes to school, data shows that some children are disciplined far more than others, and data consistently evidences that the groups of children with the highest rate of permanent exclusion are children from Gypsy, Roma and Traveller families and Black Caribbean pupils. All children can be disruptive in class sometimes, so why the clear disparity? Some people wrongly attribute this to cultural differences and we blame communities, when the stark reality is what we are seeing is a manifestation of structural racism. The cold fact is Black and minoritised children are punished more harshly, perceived as older than their white counterparts, and this is recognised as the adultification of children. It's wrong and we need to recognise and stop it. I could go on. I have so many stats and I'm aware that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go back to our charter. We start a journey to acknowledge racism, to work with our communities. We need to look at our schools, our employment policies, our communities, and it will be a long road. It will take time, commitment and resources, and most of all, tenacity. But we must never give up the fight against racism and racists. Thank you, Council. Proud to second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Story. Councillors Iron, followed by Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The EU referendum has revealed, among other things, the experience of racism among ethnic minorities in Britain. Approximately 75% of the people from ethnic minority background have reported racist abuse in person, at workplace, or on social media. People from Black background reported the highest increase in discrimination in the past years, whilst minority ethnic women from Black background have reported an increase from 60% in 2016 to 74% in 2021. Moreover, the rise in race and religious hate crime mostly took place in the first 3 months after the referendum, and it was relatively larger in areas that voted for Brexit. The spike in hate crimes that followed the Brexit vote in the summer of 2016 showed Eastern European targeted and perceived as not quite white. The toxic rhetoric surrounding immigration in the build-up to Brexit allows some Brexiteers to interpret the referendum results as endorsing their exclusionary views. We need to act now and stop racism and make Newcastle a truly inclusive and diverse city, embracing differences and where citizens feel safe and protected. I support this motion, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't intend to speak for long because I believe that there are people in this chamber who can, I'm sure, will and should speak far more powerfully than me on the matter. What I wanted to add was simply that I have learned over time that whilst I debated whether I should really stand up here as a white fella, it is important for all of us to call out racism anywhere that it happens, and that allies like myself shouldn't leave it to others to call out racism where it occurs, but to call out all forms of discrimination, no matter what that is, no matter where it occurs, when it occurs, because it's really a collective action for all of us. And I think that it's important for someone like myself to always be prepared to learn, to listen, to understand, to reflect. And I will continue to do that. And on that basis, I'm delighted that this motion has come forward this evening. I'm very happy to support it. And I'm very grateful to all of those who have spoken so far and to anyone who will speak after me. I support the motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Sadian, followed by Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Ali and Councillor Story for bringing this very important motion to the Council, which I fully support. Lord Mayor, some of us know the pain and hurt of being victimized, bullied and harassed because of who we are, and it is not at all okay. Lord Mayor, I will never accept or tolerate bullying or racial abuse. Lord Mayor, Newcastle is a multi-diverse city. We are proud of our diverse community. The diversity of our council is much better than those of neighboring councils. Perhaps the staff force of the city don't reflect the diversity of the population of the city. Nevertheless, we are an anti-racist city. I am proud of our anti-racist work, and I applaud and commend the work of the Show Racism the Red Card campaign, which is one of your chosen charities, Lord Mayor. Council, Lord Mayor, I remain firm in my commitment to fight the bullies, the racists of all forms, and I truly hope that my friends, my colleagues, and this council will join me and others in this fight to eliminate discrimination, bullying, harassment, and hate of all forms from the face of the society. I conclude by quoting the former Lord Mayor, Councillor Habib Rahman. It reads, I will definitely challenge the racist, the sexist, homophobe, Islamophobe, anti-Semitics, the bullies, the perpetrators of all forms of victimization and harassment, no matter how powerful or whom they are. I urge the Council to support this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor V, followed by Councillor Shatwell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Newcastle is a city of sanctuary, a welcoming city, and a cosmopolitan which hosts people of all cultures and ethnicities. I feel very privileged that, as an immigrant myself, I have been able to reach elected office in this fantastic city, which allows me to give something back to the city that has given me so much. But sadly, not everybody's experience has been positive like mine. In the year 2022, we would have hoped racism was a thing of the past and not an issue that our generation would have to deal with. But the sad reality is racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia all still exist in our society. And in recent years, it has been made worse by the alarmist rhetoric from our political leaders. We hope that there will be a day that we have no talk of racism in our society, but that day is a long way away. And that day won't come until our political leaders stop scapegoating the minorities and pinning people against each other. I am very heartened to see improvements in our city and across the country in the last 20 years or so. But fighting against racism is not something we can stop. And no matter how well we are doing in tackling racism, we should always aim and demand better. I support this motion, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shatwell, followed by Councillor Rockman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Iram Ali. I want to focus on two aspects of this motion: structural racism and developing anti-racist solidarities. On structural racism, as Iram has mentioned, race is a social system, not just an identity. It marks out the structural relationships of certain groups to power and to processes of exploitation and social control. Therefore, racism is an active process of keeping groups within a wider social structure of exploitation by maintaining and defending the system of race through power or through policy. This structural view of racism is important because it directs us to racist laws, conventions, practices, institutions, and ways of thinking, not just individual acts and attitudes. It also calls attention to the machinery of governments, including local governments and states, in sustaining racist practices. In Britain, social control is especially connected with questions of class and citizenship, and it's vital we remember that the dynamics of race and citizenship are always present in the creation of the working class as a social force. The form that racisms take are deeply shaped by dynamics such as class, also gender, and other social oppressions. However, it's also important that forms of racism aren't pitted against one another. Instead, different racism should be understood as part of a totality and interlocking forms of exploitation. Sivan Andan, the former director of the Institute of Race Relations, has a great quote. He said that racism never stands still. It changes shape, size, contours, purpose, function, with changes in the economy, the social structure, the system, and above all, the challenges and resistances to that system, including Black Lives Matter. This definition importantly highlights how racism changes with changes in the economic and social system, and in times of crisis, like we have now with our opening emergency motion, racism becomes more acute. Race and racism have always served to consolidate power within the British state, with state racism including border control, policing and national security. But we now have an extreme right-wing Tory government with no electoral mandate, which has just plunged us into recession and financial crash. Economists have argued, and history has shown, that fascism results from such a sudden paralysis of the global economic system due to the failure of democratic governments to protect their citizens from volatile global markets and instead reinforcing the capitalist system and defending it. And race, of course, is one of the central means through which capitalism reproduces itself. The discriminatory realities of racism are well known, and people have described those discriminations better than I can. However, we do need to connect these discriminatory realities to structural processes of social control and exploitation so that we can better fight against the conditions that enable and authorise racism. So our fight against racism, for me, I think there's three important areas. Firstly, social and ethnic divisions have made anti-racist solidarity impossible, especially in the context of Brexit, as Councillor Ion has mentioned, and they fatally divided the working class. So we need to build stronger inter-ethnic social solidarities rooted in shared experience and shared struggle, and that shared struggle, of course, includes the shared struggle around living standards and poverty. Secondly, I'll be quick, sorry. Secondly, to build a political culture that's able to mobilise mass popular action as the engine of that social change in our communities, in our trade unions. And anti-racism needs to be threaded through all sites of social struggle, not just as a separate single issue. And finally, to build these social struggles and solidarities obviously requires an organised presence within racialised communities to give political expression to discontent. And obviously that means strengthening our community infrastructure and building independent, self-organised and democratic institutions which can deepen the struggle. Thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you.
for running over.
Councillor Samad?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's essential Newcastle upon Tyne pledges to be an anti-racist city. We should be an anti-racist city. When Martin Luther King visited Newcastle, he famously said, "Morality cannot be legislated, but behaviour can be regulated." It may be true that the law cannot be changed. The law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. It may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, but it can restrain him from lynching me. And I think that's pretty important. This is why this anti-racism charter is so important to this city and to its residents. I welcome the development of anti-racism charter and will see this is a great step forward in the fight against racism in this city. I'm very keen to hear the lived experiences of citizens, and it's only through understanding the full impact of racism that we can understand the debilitating effects that such hatred has on someone. It's only by walking in their footsteps, the footsteps of victims, and hearing their stories that we can fully grasp the gravity that racism has on someone's everyday life. Everyone knows racism is wrong. Even racists know racism is wrong. You call a racist and they get offended. They start making excuses for the horrendous behaviour and the prejudices and trying to excuse themselves from what they've done and what they've committed. Unfortunately, people will always look for the differences in one another instead of trying to find the commonality with each other. Racism is everywhere in society, in the education system, in healthcare, in this council. Racism manifests itself in many forms. Obviously, everyone knows about direct racism, but sadly, indirect racism and subtle racism is becoming ever increasing. We call those things microaggressions. I've heard too many times, "Oh, so where are you from? Oh, you're one of those. You're all right, but it's them others. I have a black friend." Far too many times I've heard those little types of things. And words matter, languages really, really matter. We must use this anti-racism charter to legislate against people's prejudices. We all have prejudices. However, we all have a responsibility for our own education. To understand our prejudices and develop as a person. We can't change people's hearts. That's their own responsibility, but we can regulate their behaviour. During Black History Month, I welcome this anti-racism charter. As a city, we can't just be against racism. We must be actively anti-racist. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's that time of the evening, I'm afraid, Lord Mayor. I move suspension of Standing Order 19 to allow completion of the business on the agenda.
Is that agreed? I think that's agreed. Yes? Is it seconded? Yep. Is it agreed? No. Can we? Right. Well, we need a vote. We'll need a vote. Has everybody voted? Hands up. Councillor Ali? Councillor Ashby? Councillor Stone? Councillor Keaton, have you managed? All right, okay. Okay. So it's not carried. So we will finish this item and then we will go through the other rest of the item as quickly. Right, okay, so can we carry on, please, Councillor Samad?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Ali and Councillor Story for bringing this very important motion to the Council, which I fully support. And it's a pleasure to see the groups that have remained here to see how they support this motion as well. Lord Mayor, in 2022, we should not be debating a motion on racism. Racism should not have no place in our city and our society, but the reality is that it still does affect many of us. Racism of any and all forms is not acceptable, should not be tolerable, and I, for one, do not tolerate it at all, Lord Mayor. This council is represented by 5 Muslim councillors across the chamber, the first Roma councillor, the first councillor of Indian heritage, and the first councillor of Zimbabwean heritage, and none of us should be subjugated to any form of hate crime or racism. And challenging discrimination and racism must not be a fight just for those of us of colour. I quote Angela Davis, in a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist, we must be anti-racist. Lord Mayor, Council, I quote the city's first Muslim former Lord Mayor, Councillor Habib Rahman, when he quoted here at this chamber that he believes that we all have a devil and an evil inside of us, that he had long ago defeated that devil inside of him to make himself a better person. Lord Mayor, I say to those listening, defeat the devil and the evil inside of you, or you will be facing the consequences of the evil of your actions, like some who have. I urge the Council to fully support this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ali, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to all the speakers tonight for supporting the motion. With regards to the actual charter itself, many councils have already taken the initiative to adopt a race charter, including Gloucester City, Birmingham, Brighton and Hove, Greenwich, Wokingham, Harrow, Oxford, Lewisham, Lambeth, Cambridgeshire, the list goes on and on. The race charter sets out 5 key areas. Number 1, to appoint an executive sponsor for race. Number 2, capture ethnicity data and publicise progress. Number 3, commit at board level to zero tolerance of harassment and bullying. Number 4, make clear that supporting equality in the workplace is the responsibility of all leaders and all managers. And number 5, take action that supports ethnic minority career progression. I do want to thank the leadership and Cabinet because they have supported me immensely during the year and in bringing this motion to Council tonight. Wearing a hijab was a huge decision for me, Lord Mayor, and what it did was highlighted my faith in 2014. And the biggest opposer of it was perhaps my husband. Being a taxi driver, he faces much more aggressive racism whilst at work at almost every shift in the city, and he feared what I will have to face as a result. However, becoming a practicing Muslim gave me a new spiritual journey to take and refined me as a Muslim woman, a wife, a mother, a friend, neighbour, colleague, and a member of this society, and so much more. It gave me a real sense of purpose, Lord Mayor. To be discriminated against the colour of my skin and my faith could easily discourage me from practicing it, thus exercising my human rights. As difficult as it has been, I'm really, really glad that my family, my friends, my colleagues have given me the support to continue practicing as a Muslim and continuing in this role as a councillor and continuing in all of the public roles that I have been blessed with. And with that purpose, Lord Mayor, I continue to live and tackle Islamophobia strategically. This charter will create the much needed framework to start making real cultural change in this council and through its stakeholders, and provide a safe, welcoming, equal working environment in which people that look like me are accepted just as those that look like you. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Is this motion agreed? Thank you so much. As the guillotine has dropped, we will go through each agenda item to see what decision the proposer takes. The first one is Councillor Kilgour, defending the right to seek safety from war and persecution. Would you like to defer this or hear it tonight? Seconded? Yes? Yeah, okay, thank you. Is it agreed? Agreed. The next one, agenda item number 14, Rugby League Magic Weekend. Councillor Higgins, would you like to? It's not a speech. It's not a speech, mind, Rob.
No, not a speech at all. No, it has been a frustrating evening actually. I've prepared 3 speeches that I haven't been able to make. But as this tournament begins on the 15th of October, and I'm sure we'll all support it, then it has to be agreed this evening. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is it seconded? Well, it's got here Rugby League Magic Weekend. Are you going to second this, Jerry? Yeah. Can we change the wording? We'll change the wording and then will you second it? Right, thank you. Is the motion agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Before we close the meeting today, colleagues, can I ask you to stay behind just for 2 minutes to follow on from the previous motion and to have a photograph taken showing the rest of the country and world that we will not suffer racism, and have a photograph to showing the racism, the red card. If you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. The next meeting is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 2nd of November. Thank you. So if you want to come forward, grab a card and cluster together so Linda can get everybody in one snap. Down to you, Linda.